Right, ladies and gentlemen, could we come to order? I've just saying to the Chief Executive, we've just had the official Cabinet photograph taken, and it shows you how long we've been in control of this authority, because the last one was black and white when I looked at it. It's overdue, but there we are. Right, could we kick off with apologies for absence, please?
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Susan O'Brien.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in matters before this meeting? None. If so, could I ask the Cabinet to approve the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting on pages 1 to 10? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And as usual, to confirm that items marked in Part 1 will be heard in public, and they are Cabinet Reports 5 to 7 and Cabinet Reports 8 to 11, plus Agenda B, which is an additional Part 2 report, Highways Works Term Contract 2014 Additional Services. Those reports will be held in private or heard in private. So, on to the first agenda item tonight. Agenda item 5, page 11, the Older People's Plan, update November 2016. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Leader. I move the report providing our latest update on the Older People's Plan. Such is the breadth and depth of the activities included within it. We can only really capture a flavour of it in the report before us. For example, the work on the dementia strategy. Beyond what the report states, yesterday I was at a review meeting for the dementia strategy, and I was hearing about the work to deliver dementia-friendly design features for the supporting housing units at Grassy Meadows, as well as progress that's been made with businesses to create a dementia-friendly town centre. That's just one example of how far these things go beyond what we read in the report. The other thing that strikes me as I look at it is I spoke at full council the other day about the issue with BT that we had recently. And I think that just serves to remind us of the value of telecare, the take-up of which has increased very significantly in recent months, as the report indicates, which is a very important part of our out-of-hospital strategy. And, of course, all of this is complemented by the wide range of well-being activity within the report to keep people independent and healthy. I could go on, but I shall not. I will commend the report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons.
Well, thank you, Leader. It was my privilege last Friday evening to go and give out the prizes and the certificates at the Adult Education Awards evening. I just wanted to mention that because I think there's lots of fantastic stuff in here, and it shows really how far Hillingdon's willing to go to support older people, as Councillor Cawthorne's outlined. But of course there is so much more than that as well. And I just think it's worth putting that on the record, that I think Hillingdon can be justifiably proud at a time when there isn't a huge amount of money to go around in local government, but we do still have, not just in the context of social care, not just in the context of sport and leisure, but in the context of adult education as well, a really rich offer for our older residents, which seems to be, from the feedback I had in that context, very, very popular indeed.
Yeah, I no doubt it is popular, and I think it is. I'm doing the staff roadshows next week, and I'll be pointing out to the staff this is part of breaking down the silos. We're spending money on libraries and looking after our older residents in so many different ways, keeps them from falling back on social care earlier than they would do. It's very important that we maintain this as long as we can, and I think we've got it right, and perhaps other councils haven't. Things like free burglar alarms. Have 7,000 free burglar alarms. People feel safer in their homes at night. As you say, Councillor Cawthorne, the telecare line free to over 80s. It's 3,600 odd of them using that. Free swimming lessons. Just keep them active. Free allotments. The brown badge scheme. The supporting the community events. On page 22, I think, of the quarterly report, you'll see a list there of just during this quarter two, all the organisations that have run lunches and outings, and of course this time of year they're all looking for their Christmas events and whatever, and it is great to be able to support those. And on page 15, the work at Bell Farm Christian Centre in West Drayton, who do a terrific job. We've given them £80,000 towards extending that, so they can provide an additional capacity for 25 more people to go there for lunch, and this is quite important. It's the sort of thing that it is easy for councils, as Councillor Simmons was indicating, to lose this in budget reviews and whatever. These are the sort of things that people are saying nice to have, but they're more than nice to have, particularly for the older people involved. So with that, is the recommendation agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 6, page 25 of the Council Budget 16-17, month 6, Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. Well, this is the halfway mark in the Council's year. It seems a bit odd, here we are in November, but this is to show the situation as at September. The recommendations are on the bottom of page 25 and on the top of page 26, numbers 1 to 6. But in addition to those, on the addendum sheet there are 2 further recommendations, numbers 6 and 7, which are largely self-explanatory, but I know that you will talk to them in a minute or two. So I think it's probably fair for me to just touch on a few things, which again is that, as again this month, the net underspend, in-year underspend is 1.17 million, which is a slight improvement on the previous month, and that is in generally a good place to be. And it's perhaps worth noting that our progress on savings, page 29, paragraph 18, having started the year with a savings requirement of over 13 million, more than 12 of that has now been banked or is on track, and the remaining 9% is on the way. So it does show that we can get where we wanted to. Now on page 61, there is where you will find the capital programme, and you will see again a underspend of some 27 odd million, which is in part favourable cost variances, 3.5 million roughly, but in large part slippage on programme expenditure. So I'm sure that it indicates, as usual, that on a £96 million spend, that we as a council are embarking, as always, on significant investment in our schools, particularly, but in a whole range of other things too. And on that point, I will move the recommendations shown.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Going through those recommendations, then note the forecast budget provision, recommendation 1. Recommendation 2, the Treasury Management Update, as at September, is on page 67, Appendix E. Sorry, page 68. Appendix. No, it isn't. You're on right. 67, first time. Yep. Average rate of return on deposits, 0.61%. Average rate of return on debt, just over 3%. But there is a note on page 30, the paragraph 20, which is worth looking at this time. The reduction in the Bank of England base rate from 0.5% to 0.25% will reduce gross yield from investments from August 16. However, it's not expected to impact on our income received, as we generally have a combination of fixed-term investments. We're not subject to the day-to-day rate cuts. Recommendation 3, that is page 68. This is the agency staff appointments, which have tipped over the 50,000 mark since they were first engaged. 2 in admin and finance, 7 in residence services, and the rest in social care, as detailed in that appendix, and they are for noting. Recommendation 4, to note the transfer and release of £965,000 Capital Priority Growth Fund and £79,000 General Contingency Fund to the Battle of Britain Heritage Project. That project has started. This is an additional cost. The final tender price was just over £1 million higher than the approved budget. mainly due to a change in the scope of works. We're getting a better building. We've had a look at it in detail. A slight increase because there was the delay in receiving the transfer of the land from the Ministry of Defence. But this will be a superb facility and should be up and open by September of next year. Recommendation 5 is to approve the rephasing of £2 million for new general needs housing stock budget from next year to this year. In the medium-term financial forecast, we have £10 million earmarked for buybacks, to buy back properties that people have purchased under the right to buy. We have the funds, so we don't see the point of waiting. We're not going to wait till next year to buy some. We'll draw it back and we'll buy them now. That's the purpose that we draw back that £2 million. Recommendation 6 is to approve the gift funding, the planning performance agreements as detailed, former British Legion, West Drayton, Arena Stockley Park and Mount Vernon Hospital. These are funds that will be utilised to fund dedicated staff to support those particular applications. As Councillor Bianco mentioned, there are 2 further recommendations on the addendum sheet. The first is to ratify a special urgency decision that I took on the 10th of November. We were aiming to have a new payroll system up and running by the end of this year. The outfit that we were considering using is having some difficulties, so for the avoidance of any doubt, we decided that we would stay where we were for the moment and ensure that everybody continued to get paid, hence that need for urgency. It always, yes, it included members' allowances as well, so, so it had to be done. New recommendation 8. Now, you'll note in paragraph 13, as it says in the supporting information, that as part of the zero-based budgeting review for 17-18, we have looked at uncommitted budgets, non-staffing budgets, and they've been consolidated into service level contingencies. That's happening in the current year as well. We will do that this year, and this is to enable those contingencies to be utilised as and when we think they will be needed by the Director of Finance and myself. There were numerous budgets with small amounts, 2,000, 1,000, not touched at the halfway stage, so we've consolidated them all, put them into contingency accounts in the specific service areas that they originated from, and now we will see if there's any demands on those budgets, and this will enable us to better align the budgets going forward. So that's the purpose of that. I think there's not much else to say. I think paragraph 26 is worth mention. On top of the surplus, the budget surplus that we are declaring, we have £1.8 million, which is an unallocated priority growth or in HIP initiative budgets. So there's an additional 1.8 that hasn't been allocated to anything in the current year's budget. So fairly strong position at month 6. With that, I move. Oh, you've already moved the recommendations, Councillor Bianco. So are recommendations 1 to 8 agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 7, page 71, School Capital Programme. Councillor Simmons.
Well, thank you, Leader. We noted in the last budget report that Hillingdon schools experienced a further increase in their level of balances this year, and that is, of course, one of the elements which we've always looked at, asking schools to make a contribution to works programmes and to elements of the expansion that they require when possible. The report that's in front of Cabinet this evening continues to show solid progress. I think a number of members were able to visit the newly opened Northwood Secondary School. It was my pleasure to do the topping out, although it wasn't really a topping out. I think they gave us a wall to go and stand by and then knocked it down after we left, but it probably looked very good in the photographs. However, I think the building that's there now, I'm sure, is an awful lot more solid than it would have been had I been working on the brickwork. But the that's an example, really, of the standard of buildings that we've sought to provide in the schools that we've expanded. We need to make sure that they are fit for purpose for the longer term. We don't want to be here in 10, 15, 20 years' time having to spend a fortune improving them, because we simply didn't build them well enough the first time round. But as is outlined, we continue to make good progress in all the projects around the borough, and I think credit is due, in particular in the context of Northwood, to those officers who delivered that project, made sure that the children at that school, which for the first time in a very long time is getting an applicant for every single place, which is enormous tribute, I think, to the reputation of the school as it's improved, and that all of that was delivered on time. So with that, I'll move the recommendation.
Recommendation agreed? Thank you. Right, we now move to part